And he was afraid, right?
Yeah, the memo says he was scared for his life, he even thought he might have to skip town. And here's the thing. Less than 6 months later, he's found dead in his apartment. Official ruling.
Suicide. But a lot of people don't buy that, do they?
Not really.
You're listening to the Untold American Podcast, hosted by Dean and Jess. It's your go-to show for uncovering the fascinating, bizarre, and untold stories of American history and news. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode of the stories you won't hear anywhere else.
Welcome back to Untold American. Dean Harper here.
And Jess Morgan.
So, Jess, we're diving back into true American conspiracy theories that, well, turned out to be more fact than fiction.
And this time, it's a big one. One that's had people talking for, over half a century?
That's right. We're tackling the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And what makes this even more, I guess, timely is that the government recently declassified a whole bunch of files about it.
Tons of documents, Dean, and they're shading some new light on this whole thing. So what we're going to do today is go through some of these files, the highlights, and see how they stack up against the theories that have been floating around for years. Especially those connected to Lyndon B. Johnson. I mean, Roger Stone's been pretty vocal about that whole angle.
Oh, absolutely. But let's be real. There are thousands of pages here. It's an absolute mountain of information. Over 1,000 PDFs. We're talking something like 63,000 pages initially. And who knows, they say there might be even more to come.
It's a lot to dig through. So before we jump in, let's remind everyone of the official conclusion, the one from the Warren Commission. Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone.
Right, a lone gunman. But let's be honest, that hasn't exactly satisfied a lot of people. Skepticism about that has been around since, well, practically day one.
For sure. And one of the biggest lingering questions, especially back then, was Oswald connected to the KGB? Was he some kind of Soviet agent?
Right, in the thick of the Cold War, that was a major concern.
Absolutely. So there's this interesting letter, it's from 1982, from David Blee, who used to head up the CIA's Soviet division. It talks about Oswald trying to get a visa at the Soviet embassy in Mexico City.
Oh, right. And this is just a couple of months before the assassination.
Exactly. Now, the letter mentions the consular officer who dealt with Oswald's request, a guy named Kosakov. The CIA said they had no information indicating any relationship between the two beyond just that visa application.
But here's the thing about Kosakov. The CIA described him as a real, effective, and dangerous intelligence officer. They actually said he was without morals, education, and manners.
Wow. That paints a pretty vivid picture of the guy.
It really does. But then there's this other document from 1993 about a potential KGB official named Nikonov.
Now, what's the story with him?
So Nikonov, he supposedly went through the KGB's own files on Oswald. He was trying to see if they'd ever actually had Oswald as a controlled agent.
Huh. And what did he find?
Well, he looked at like 5 volumes of files on Oswald. And his conclusion, Oswald was never a KGB agent. In fact, he said it seemed like nobody could control Oswald.
So a bit of a loose cannon.
That seems to be the implication. But Nikonov did mention that the KGB had Oswald under constant watch while he was in the USSR. Not surprising, given he was an American defector.
Right. I mean, you'd expect that.
Of course. And get this, the KGB files apparently revealed that Oswald's relationship with his Soviet wife was, well, rocky, to say the least.
Adding to the whole unpredictable image.
Exactly. Oh, and one more thing. The files said that Oswald was a really bad shot when he tried target practice in the USSR.
That's interesting, especially considering the whole lone gunman sharpshooter narrative.
Right. Makes you think. And there's also this massive 416-page CIA study, marked top secret, titled The Examination of the Bona Fides of a KGB Defector. It's by Urinesenko. And part of it says that back in 1959, 1960, the KGB decided Oswald wasn't useful to them and shouldn't stay in the Soviet Union.
So if you're putting it all together, it sounds like the KGB wasn't pulling Oswald's strings. At least that's what their own records in this CIA analysis seem to indicate.
Yeah, that seems to be the takeaway so far. But then you get into this whole other area. Did anyone know about this before it happened? Was there some kind of advance warning about Oswald?
Oh, right. Like a heads up that was missed.
Exactly. So there's this routing sheet from April 3rd, 1978, talking about a letter from a Sergei Zorro.
Okay, who is Sergei Zorro and what's he saying?
He claims he tipped off the American vice consul in Sofia, Bulgaria, about Oswald in August of '63.
3 months before the assassination. That's wild.
Right. So Zorro supposedly sent a handwritten letter in kind of broken English, from London in July 63. He said he'd overheard people talking in Vienna about an American defector named Lee Harvey Oswald who was going to assassinate Kennedy.
Wow, so he just overheard this.
That's what he says. But there's more. Apparently, he also got info from the Soviet embassy in Sofia on August 14th, 63. They told him Oswald was an assassin planning to kill Kennedy the next day, on the 15th, at the airport in Sofia.
So he's claiming both a random overhearing and then confirmation from Soviet sources.
That's the gist of it. He then claims he told an American vice consul named Blacksher in Sofia that Oswald was an assassin, had a weapon, and would do it after some right-wing stuff came out in the newspapers. Blacksher supposedly said he'd telegram the State Department and gave Zorro an address in D.C. to report to.
And did Zorro go to Washington?
He says he did, met some director at the State Department. They told him not to mention Kennedy by name, supposedly. And then he claims he predicted Oswald would be killed after Kennedy and even said James Earl Ray would kill Martin Luther King Jr.
Wait, James Earl Ray? But he was in prison then, wasn't he?
Yeah, Zorro even pointed that out himself in his account.
So something doesn't add up there.
Exactly. It's a very strange story. Oh, and to make things even weirder, Zorro claims the FBI drugged him later.
Okay, now I'm even more lost. So was this a real warning that was ignored, or is Zorro just making things up? The part about James Earl Ray definitely raises a red flag.
I agree. It's hard to know what to make of that.
It is. So let's move on to something a little more concrete. What about Oswald getting back into the U.S.?
Right. There's a memo from January 29th, 1964, talking about a newspaper column. Apparently, the column said that Abram Chase, who was a State Department legal guy, and Llewellyn Thompson, the ambassador to Russia, were basically responsible for Oswald being allowed back in June 62.
Okay, so specific people in the State Department were involved in letting him back in. Does it say why?
The memo doesn't get into the reasons, just that they were the ones behind it. It's one of those things that makes you wonder, you know?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Okay, what about the FBI? What's in these files about their dealings with Oswald?
There's some Warren Commission testimony from Alan H. Belmont, one of J. Edgar Hoover's assistant directors.
Big position.
Oh, yeah. So Belmont testified on May 6th, 1964, and he talked about questioning Oswald, trying to figure out why he defected. Oswald said he had a change of heart, said he'd developed this new concept of the American way of life, and that he hadn't liked being in Russia or even in the Marines.
So he's painting this picture of disillusionment, wanting to come home. Did the FBI buy it?
Belmont's testimony doesn't really say whether they believed him or not. But here's the important part. Both he and J. Edgar Hoover himself, in a separate letter, said that Oswald was absolutely not an FBI informant.
That shuts down some of those theories about Oswald being a plant.
Yeah, if you believe him, of course.
Right, of course. Okay, so what about Oswald actually leaving the USSR? How did that all go down?
The Warren Commission looked into that too. One of their guys, David Slauson, was on that.
Okay, and
in July 64, he wrote to Richard Helms at the CIA. He said he didn't think Oswald leaving was that suspicious because after Stalin, the Soviets were more relaxed about letting people go. But he wanted to check with the State Department to be sure.
So maybe it was just easier to leave the Soviet Union back then?
Could be. Now, this next part is a bit more, well, unsettling, to say the least.
Lay it on me.
This is about a former CIA guy named Gary Underhill.
Underhill, yeah, his story's always been a bit creepy.
Definitely. So there's a memo from July 19th, 1967, about something Underhill said the day after Kennedy was assassinated.
Yeah.
He told some friends that a small clique within the CIA killed Kennedy.
And he was afraid, right?
Yeah, the memo says he was scared for his life, even thought he might have to skip town. And here's the thing. Less than 6 months later, he's found dead in his apartment. Official ruling.
Suicide. But a lot of people don't buy that, do they?
Not really. His friend said he wasn't drunk or anything, just super agitated when he told them about this CIA group. He said they were into all kinds of shady stuff, gun running, drugs, political intrigue, and that Kennedy was going to expose them.
Okay, that sounds like a motive.
Right. But then there's how he died. Shot behind the left ear, gun under his left side, even though he was right-handed, and no one in the building heard a shot.
Not exactly screaming suicide, is it?
Not really. It makes you think about, rogue elements within these agencies.
For sure. Okay, switching gears a bit. Did anyone find out how other world leaders reacted to the assassination?
Oh, yeah. There's a document from December 18th, 1963, about Fidel Castro's reaction. And it might surprise you.
How so?
Apparently, he was very upset when Kennedy was killed.
Upset. I mean, they weren't exactly best buds.
I know, right? But the document says Castro thought Kennedy wouldn't invade Cuba directly, and that his policies like the economic blockade and trying to stir up trouble inside Cuba wouldn't work.
Huh. So he maybe preferred Kennedy to whoever came next.
That's what it sounds like. The document also says Castro told his government not to bash Johnson or do anything to annoy him. They wanted to wait and see what Johnson's stance on Cuba would be.
So a wait-and-see approach from Castro. That's interesting.
It is. Speaking of Cuba, there's a ton of stuff in these files about CIA operations against Castro around the time of the assassination. Meetings about sabotaging the Havana power plant, requests for visits to Guantanamo Bay, intel on arms shipments. There's even this report from August 1959 quoting someone who called Castro a univac machine, ruthless and determined.
Wow. So the U.S. was definitely busy trying to take Castro down. It's not hard to imagine how all this could fuel conspiracy theories about Kennedy's assassination.
Absolutely. All these covert actions, the people involved, it's a breeding ground for speculation.
Definitely. And it's not just about Kennedy, right? There's also some stuff about Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination.
Right. There's a memo to the FBI director about a guy named Roderick Claflin Brown. In April '68, he reported an encounter he had back in '62 at an airport in Panama with a Marvin P. Luttrell. Luttrell called Dr. King our greatest problem and offered Brown a job, but didn't say what it was.
Sounds suspicious.
Well, Brown thought so, too. He told the authorities he thought the job was connected to plans to kill Dr. King.
Wow.
Yeah. And he kind of brushed it off at the time, but after King was killed in April '68, it all came back to him.
It's unsettling to see both these assassinations mentioned in the same set of files.
It is. And to give you an idea of just how detailed these files are, there are even memos about specific covert actions. Like there's one from July 18th, 1963, with plans to bug a house, complete with a fake reason for being there.
Wow. A real peek behind the curtain of those times.
You got it. So what are the historians saying about all this?
They're being pretty cautious. They're saying it'll take a long time to really go through everything. We're talking months, maybe years. Tim Naftali, he's at Columbia University. He thinks a lot of the redacted stuff was probably to protect CIA sources and methods, not necessarily a cover-up.
And with so much information, it's hard to tell what's brand new and what's just stuff they're releasing again without the blacked out parts. The general consensus is that nothing has come out yet that completely overturns the Warren Commission's conclusion that Oswald acted alone.
Which brings us to Roger Stone and his theory about LBJ being behind it all. He was on Charlie Kirk's show recently talking about these files.
And I bet he's sticking to his guns.
Oh, absolutely. He's still saying the CIA lied about what they knew about Oswald and that they knew he wasn't a good shot. He doesn't think Oswald was the shooter from the 6th floor and says these documents back him up, even if some of it might be cleaned up. And he's still bringing up the whole lack of powder burns on Oswald.
And he still thinks LBJ was the mastermind.
100%. He says the proof of LBJ's involvement is already out there. He keeps pointing to the supposed fingerprints of Malcolm Mack Wallace, one of Johnson's associates. They say they found them on the window and boxes in the sniper's nest in the Texas School Book Depository.
But that fingerprint claim has been challenged a lot. Other experts have looked at it, and the forensics don't seem to add up.
Right, but Stone is standing by it. He's saying Wallace killed a guy named John Douglas Kinzer in 1951 because Kinzer was blackmailing LBJ. He also says 6 witnesses saw a man who looked like Wallace in the window, not Oswald.
And then there's that audio tape Alex Jones released, the one where Billy Celestes and Cliff Carter supposedly talk about Johnson hiring Wallace to kill Kennedy.
Yep, Stone says that tape is proof. He also tells the story about talking to Richard Nixon, and Nixon supposedly said the Warren Commission was a hoax and that he and LBJ both wanted to be president, but Nixon wasn't willing to kill for it. Stone says that's what made him write his book about it all.
So he's saying LBJ was a pretty ruthless guy.
Definitely. And he says LBJ was in charge of CIA funding as vice president, that he took bribes from Carlos Marcello and was tight with big Texas oil, all motives for people to get involved.
And what about the CIA? Why would they be in on it, according to Stone?
He thinks they were mad about the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis. And he says they were worried about Kennedy using amphetamines from Dr. Max Jacobson, who even went to the Vienna summit with Kennedy.
So Stone's got a lot of moving parts in his theory.
He does. He even talks about Malcolm Kilduff's memoir, where LBJ supposedly said Kennedy was killed by a communist son before they even caught Oswald, and about an FBI telex that went out saying Oswald was in custody before they actually had him.
Those details have been fueling conspiracy theories for years. And of course, Stone believes there were multiple shooters.
Oh, yeah. He says Wallace was on the 6th floor, there was a Corsican assassin on the grassy knoll, maybe another shooter in the Daltex building, and even Johnny Roselli shooting from a sewer. He mentioned 16 doctors who supposedly saw a huge exit wound on the back of Kennedy's head, which means the shot came from the front. He also says they took Kennedy's body out of Texas illegally and that his brain disappeared.
It's a very detailed story, but a lot of what he's saying is disputed by mainstream historians and the forensic evidence. He even compares the JFK assassination to stuff that supposedly happened with threats against President Trump.
And he's working on a book about the Reagan assassination attempt. Says there are holes in that story, too. He thinks there's this deep state behind it all.
So where does that leave us?
Well, these JFK files, at least from what we've seen, are mostly shedding light on Oswald's actions before the assassination and the whole Cold War scene. We're getting more details on his trips to Soviet and Cuban embassies, the CIA watching him, and all the secret U.S. operations going on back then.
But like the experts have said, there's no smoking gun here. No hard proof that overturns the Warren Commission's idea that Oswald acted alone. And nothing's definitively proven Stone's theories about LBJ either.
Right. You've got Stone with his very specific, complex conspiracy theory, and then you have the historians who are being much more cautious about these new documents. It's fascinating, isn't it? These files definitely give us some interesting details and might confirm some suspicions about government secrecy, but they also highlight how complicated the JFK assassination really was, and it's still tough to say for sure what really happened.
Yeah. You know, when you think about all the secrecy, the different stories, and how people are still so fascinated by it all, it really makes you wonder, does this show that Americans don't trust their institutions? Or are we just trying to find clear answers in a situation that might not have any?
And I'm Jess.
As always, I'm Dean. Tune in next time for more Untold American.
This has been the Untold American Podcast with Dean and Jess. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed exploring these untold stories with us. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode. Don't forget to leave a review. Your support helps us uncover even more fascinating stories. Until next time, stay curious and keep discovering America's untold.